Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary stories come to life. If you've subscribed for more stories, enjoy the ride now. Dr. Alex Rivera found Vera in Lab Section C at 0347 hours, hunched over a microscopic analysis terminal with the kind of focus that suggested she'd been there far longer than her shift required. Again. The soft blue glow of the holographic displays cast shadows across her pale features, highlighting the exhaustion she thought she'd hidden behind her usual mask of clinical efficiency. "Iris," Alex called softly to the station's AI, "what time did Dr. Nightshade begin her current work session?" "Dr. Nightshade entered Lab Section C at 2100 hours yesterday evening," Iris replied in her perpetually cheerful British accent. "She has not taken any breaks longer than 6 minutes during the past 8 hours and 47 minutes. Alex sighed, approaching Vera's workstation with the careful deliberation of someone who'd learned that startling a sleep-deprived Sanguinari researcher could result in accidentally triggered defensive reflexes. "Vera, you're supposed to be on rest rotation." "I'm fine," Vera replied without looking up from her analysis of what appeared to be interdimensional parasite cellular structures. Her voice carried the flat precision that Alex had learned meant she was anything but fine. "The specimens from the Kepler 186F outbreak require immediate classification before degradation compromises the sample integrity. The specimens have been stabilized in temporal stasis fields. They'll keep for months if necessary." Alex moved closer, noting the slight tremor in Vera's hands that she probably thought he couldn't detect. "When's the last time you actually slept?" "Sanguinari require less rest than humans." "That's not what I asked." Vera's fingers paused over the holographic interface for just a moment before resuming their precise manipulations. "Sleep schedules are irrelevant when dealing with Class A xenobiological threats." Alex studied her profile, noting details that had become familiar over their 8 months of collaboration aboard Aurora Prime. Vera's silver-white hair was pulled back in its usual severe bun, but several strands had escaped to frame her angular face. Her crimson eyes, the distinctive mark of the Sanguinari, were focused with laser intensity on her work, but Alex could see the telltale signs of strain around the edges. Most telling of all, she was unconsciously avoiding any position that would bring her into casual physical proximity with him, maintaining her usual careful distance even in the cramped lab space. "You know," Alex said, settling into a chair at the adjacent workstation, "normal people would just say they couldn't sleep instead of making up elaborate justifications for unauthorized overtime. I am not normal people, human." The way she said "human," not as an insult, but as a reminder of the gulf between them, made something twist uncomfortably in Alex's chest. After 8 months of working together, sharing meals in the station's common areas, and developing what he thought was a genuine friendship, Vera still insisted on maintaining professional distance that felt increasingly artificial. "No, you're not," Alex agreed. "You're brilliant, dedicated, and apparently incapable of accepting help when you obviously need it." Vera's hands stilled completely. "I don't need help." "Really?" "Because from where I'm sitting, you look like someone who's been pushing herself to the breaking point for reasons she won't discuss with anyone. My personal behavioral patterns are not a subject for analysis." "Everything's a subject for analysis. That's what makes us scientists." Alex leaned forward, his tone gentle but persistent. "Vera, you've been working double shifts for weeks, avoiding the common areas, and eating maybe 1 meal a day. Yesterday I caught you talking to the parasite specimens like you were apologizing to them." "That's not dedication, that's something else entirely." For the first time since he'd entered the lab, Vera looked directly at him. Her crimson eyes held a flash of something that might have been panic before she looked away again. "The research is important," she said quietly. "The research is important," Alex agreed. "But so are you. And whatever's driving this obsessive behavior is clearly eating you alive." Vera's entire body went rigid. "You don't understand." "Then explain it to me." Alex kept his voice calm, non-confrontational. "Help me understand why someone as brilliant as you seems determined to work herself into exhaustion. Why you flinch every time someone tries to be friendly. Why you look at these parasite samples like they're personally responsible for every bad thing that's ever happened to you? Because they are, Vera whispered, so quietly that Alex almost missed it. What? Vera stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair in the process. Her carefully controlled composure was cracking, and Alex could see something raw and desperate behind her professional mask. Why do you do this? She asked, her voice rising slightly. Why do you persist in caring about things that aren't your concern? Because I'm your friend, Alex replied simply. And friends worry about each other when they see someone they care about struggling. Friends, Vera repeated, as if testing the word in a foreign language. You think we're friends? Aren't we? Vera laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. You're human. I'm Sanguinari. We work together efficiently because our skill sets complement each other. That doesn't constitute friendship. Alex felt a stab of hurt at her dismissive tone, but he pushed it aside. He'd learned to recognize deflection when he heard it, and Vera was deflecting hard enough to power the station's engines. Is that what you tell yourself? Alex asked. That this is just professional collaboration? That you don't feel anything when we spend 18 hours straight working on a breakthrough together? That it doesn't matter to you when I bring you coffee the way you like it, or when I remember that you prefer the observation deck during gamma shift because it's quieter? Those are merely considerate gestures between colleagues. Bullshit. Alex's bluntness seemed to startle Vera. Colleagues don't memorize each other's favorite constellations or spend their off-duty time researching Sanguinari cultural traditions so they can avoid accidentally giving offense. Colleagues don't worry about each other the way I worry about you. Vera was backing away from him now, her carefully controlled facade crumbling. Stop. Why? Because it's easier to pretend there's nothing between us than to deal with the possibility that maybe, just maybe, you're not as alone as you think you are. Because I can't. The words exploded out of Vera with enough force to make the lab's equipment hum with sympathetic vibration. Because every time you're kind to me, every time you look at me like I matter, it hurts in ways you can't possibly comprehend. Alex blinked in surprise at the raw pain in her voice. Vera. You want to understand? Vera's crimson eyes were blazing now, and Alex could see that her hands were shaking. You want to know why I work myself to exhaustion and avoid forming connections and apologize to dead specimens? Yes, Alex said quietly. I do. Vera stared at him for a long moment, something desperate and terrified warring in her expression. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet he had to strain to hear her. Please understand me, human, she whispered, and the words came out like a plea torn from somewhere deep inside her chest. Please understand that everything you think you know about me, everything you think you feel for me, it's built on a lie. And if you knew the truth, you wouldn't want to be my friend. You wouldn't want to be in the same room as me. Alex felt his heart break a little at the absolute conviction in her voice. Try me. I can't. Vera's composure finally shattered completely, and she sank into her chair as if her legs could no longer support her. I can't bear to see the way you'll look at me when you know what I really am. What you really are, Alex said gently, is someone who's been carrying something terrible all by herself for far too long. And I think, no, I know, that you're wrong about how I'll react to whatever it is you're so afraid to tell me. Vera looked up at him with those extraordinary crimson eyes, and Alex saw centuries of pain and isolation reflected in their depths. You don't know what you're asking, she said. Then show me, Alex replied. Trust me enough to show me. For several heartbeats, they stared at each other across the lab, the only sound the gentle hum of the station's life support systems. Finally, Vera closed her eyes and took a shuddering breath. The parasites we're studying, she said quietly, the ones from the Kepler 186F outbreak that killed 3,000 colonists and left their research station a dead hulk floating in space. Yes. Vera opened her eyes and met his gaze with heartbreaking directness. I was there. I was the only survivor. And Alex. I think it might have been my fault. The silence that followed Vera's confession stretched between them like a chasm. Alex stared at her, processing the implications of what she'd just revealed, while Vera seemed to shrink into herself with each passing second of his lack of response. "Iris," Alex finally said, his voice carefully neutral, "please enable privacy mode for Lab Section C and suspend all monitoring except emergency life support alerts." "Privacy mode engaged, Dr. Rivera," Iris replied, though her usually cheerful tone carried a note of concern. "Shall I also prepare medical assistance protocols in case?" "Just the privacy mode for now, thanks." The lab's status lights shifted to amber, indicating they were now in a communication blackout with the rest of the station. Vera watched this process with growing alarm, as if Alex's request for privacy confirmed her worst fears about his reaction. "You're going to report me to Station Command," she said flatly. "I'm going to listen to you," Alex corrected. "All of it. Without interruption, without judgment, and definitely without involving command unless you want them involved." He pulled his chair closer to hers, ignoring the way she tensed at his proximity. "Start from the beginning. What happened at Kepler 186F? Vera stared at him as if he'd spoken in an alien language. You want details? About how I potentially caused the deaths of 3,000 people. "I want to understand what happened to someone I care about," Alex replied firmly. "There's a difference." "Dr. Rivera," Iris interjected, apparently unable to remain completely silent despite privacy mode, "I feel obligated to mention that Dr. Nightshade's stress indicators are approaching concerning levels. Perhaps a medical evaluation." "Iris, with respect, please limit yourself to emergency interventions only." "Of course, Doctor. Though I should note that my friendship subroutine suggests that offering comfort foods and emotional support might be more effective than interrogation techniques." Despite everything, Vera let out a sound that might have been a laugh. "Your AI is attempting to provide relationship counseling. Iris has been reading human psychology texts in her spare processing time," Alex explained. "She's developed some interesting theories about interpersonal dynamics." "Indeed I have," Iris said brightly. "For instance, did you know that sharing traumatic experiences can actually strengthen social bonds between individuals? It's quite fascinating from an evolutionary perspective." "Iris," Alex said patiently, "emergency interventions only." "Right. Sorry." Continuing silent monitoring. Vera looked between Alex and the now quiet AI with an expression of bewildered amazement. "You're both insane. I just told you that I might be responsible for mass genocide, and you're worried about my stress levels and discussing psychology research." "Because genocide doesn't sound like something you'd do," Alex said simply. "The Vera I know spends her free time researching non-invasive sample collection methods and apologizing to microorganisms. So either you're a completely different person than I thought, or there's more to this story." Vera was quiet for so long that Alex began to wonder if she decided not to continue. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "The research station at Kepler 186F was studying dimensional barrier degradation, areas where the boundaries between our reality and adjacent dimensions had grown thin. We thought we'd found a way to stabilize the barriers, maybe even strengthen them." She paused, her hands clenching into fists in her lap. "I was the project lead. 23 brilliant researchers from 7 different species, all following my theoretical framework. What went wrong? We didn't realize that the parasites existed in a state of quantum flux between dimensions. Our stabilization field didn't strengthen the barriers, it created resonance points that allowed the parasites to anchor themselves in our reality." Vera's voice grew more strained with each word. "They manifested inside the station. Inside the research team." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. "They infected your colleagues?" "Not infected. Consumed. From the inside out, starting with neural tissue and working their way through the major organ systems. The process took approximately 6 hours per victim." Vera's crimson eyes were distant now, lost in memory. "I watched them die," one by one. Listen to them scream my name, asking why I'd let this happen. Vera. Alex started, but she held up a hand to stop him. The worst part is that I could feel it happening. Sanguinari empathic abilities don't shut off during crisis situations. I experienced every moment of their terror, their pain, their realization that they were going to die because of my mistake. Her voice cracked. 23 distinct death experiences, Alex. 23 brilliant minds reduced to screaming agony, and I felt all of it while being completely powerless to help them. Alex understood now why she pushed everyone away, why she worked alone, why human kindness caused her pain. The empathic feedback created a trauma loop. For my species, emotional trauma becomes physically embedded in our psychic matrix, Vera explained. What you call PTSD, we experience as literal psychic scarring that affects our ability to process new emotional input. Every time someone shows me kindness, every time I feel friendship or connection, it activates the trauma response because my mind associates emotional vulnerability with catastrophic loss. That's why you've been avoiding the common areas. Why you flinch when people try to be friendly. Being around you is simultaneously healing and agonizing, Vera admitted. You're patient and kind in everything I lost when my research team died. But accepting that kindness means accepting the risk of losing it again, and I don't think I could survive another empathic feedback loop of that magnitude. Alex sat back in his chair, trying to process the layers of Vera's suffering. How long have you been carrying this alone? 14 years, 7 months, 12 days. And in all that time, you never told anyone? Who would I tell? The Sanguinari Council classified the incident and transferred me to deep space research as punishment for my negligence. Human authorities have no framework for understanding empathic trauma. Other species either don't care or actively avoid Sanguinari who've been psychically damaged. Vera looked at him with heartbreaking honesty. You're the first person in over a decade who's shown genuine concern for my welfare. And now you know why I can't accept it. Alex was quiet for several minutes, thinking through everything Vera had revealed. Finally, he stood up and moved to the lab's small food synthesizer. What are you doing? Vera asked. Making coffee. The good stuff, not the standard station blend. Alex programmed the synthesizer with practiced efficiency. Because this conversation isn't over, and we both need caffeine. Vera stared at him in confusion. Did you not understand what I just told you? I killed 3,000 people through scientific negligence. I'm psychically damaged in ways that make normal relationships impossible. I'm asking you to understand why we can't be friends. I understood perfectly, Alex replied, handing her a steaming mug of coffee prepared exactly the way she liked it, 2 sugars, no cream, with a hint of cinnamon that most humans found too subtle to notice. What I don't understand is why you think any of that changes how I feel about you. Because it should. Vera's voice cracked with frustration. Because normal humans would run screaming from someone with this much psychological damage. Good thing I'm not normal, then. Alex settled back into his chair with his own coffee. Vera, you didn't cause that outbreak intentionally. You were conducting legitimate research based on the best theoretical models available. The fact that there were unknown variables doesn't make you a murderer. The result is the same regardless of my intentions. The result is that you survived something horrific and spent 14 years punishing yourself for it instead of getting the help you needed to heal. Alex leaned forward, his tone gentle but firm. The result is that you've become an even better researcher because you understand the stakes of this work in ways most people never will. The result is that you've been protecting everyone around you by working alone, taking on the most dangerous assignments, making sure that if something goes wrong, you're the only one who gets hurt. Vera looked at him as if he were speaking an alien language. You're not horrified by what I've told you. I'm horrified by what happened to you and your team. I'm heartbroken that you've been carrying this guilt alone for so long. But horrified by you? Alex shook his head. Never. Iris, Vera called softly, are human psychological profiles typically this, forgiving of mass casualty events? Actually, Dr. Nightshade, Dr. Rivera's response falls well within normal parameters for what humans call compassionate friendship, Iris replied cheerfully. Though I should note that his stress indicators suggest he's more concerned about your well-being than his own safety, which is either very admirable or slightly concerning depending on your theoretical framework. Both, probably, Alex admitted. But that's what friends do, Vera. We worry about each other. We stick around when things get complicated. We don't abandon people just because they're carrying heavy burdens. Vera sipped her coffee slowly, her expression thoughtful. Your definition of friendship appears to be significantly more resilient than standard interpersonal protocols. My definition of friendship is based on choosing to care about someone regardless of circumstances, Alex replied. And I choose to care about you, trauma and all. The question is, are you willing to let me? Over the next several weeks, Alex made a conscious effort to prove that his support wasn't contingent on Vera's emotional recovery or professional performance. He continued bringing her coffee during her extended work sessions, but now he stayed to drink his own rather than simply dropping off the mug and leaving. He asked about her research not just as a colleague but as someone genuinely interested in her thoughts and theories. Most importantly, he shared his own struggles without making them seem equivalent to her trauma. You know, Alex said one evening as they worked side by side analyzing the latest batch of parasite specimens, I never told you why I volunteered for deep space assignment. Vera looked up from her microscopic analysis. Career advancement opportunities in xenobiology. My family died in a transport accident 3 years ago, Alex said quietly, continuing his work without meeting her eyes. Wife, 2 kids, my parents. They were all heading to Mars colony for my daughter's birthday celebration. Mechanical failure caused atmospheric breach. They had maybe 30 seconds to realize what was happening. Vera's hand stilled over her equipment. Alex. The worst part isn't the grief, Alex continued. It's the guilt. I was supposed to be on that transport, but I stayed behind to finish a research project that seemed desperately important at the time. Now I can't even remember what it was about. That's not your fault. Logically, I know that. Emotionally. Alex shrugged. I keep wondering if my presence would have made a difference. Maybe I would have noticed the mechanical problem earlier. Maybe I could have helped them survive the breach somehow. Probably not, but the what-if scenarios are endless. Vera set down her instruments completely. Is that why you work with dangerous specimens? The guilt drives you to take risks. Partly. But mostly it's because I need to feel like my survival meant something. That staying behind to finish that forgotten research project led to discoveries that might prevent other families from dying in preventable accidents. Alex finally looked at her. Sound familiar? The psychological parallels are notable, Vera admitted. The difference is that your research actually is preventing deaths. These parasite studies could save entire colonies from what happened at Kepler 186f. My work is just me trying to convince myself that I deserve to be alive when they're not. Iris, Vera called softly, are you recording this conversation for psychological analysis? Only if you specifically request it, Dr. Nightshade, Iris replied. Though I must say, this level of mutual vulnerability is quite remarkable from an interpersonal dynamics perspective. My databases suggest that sharing personal trauma typically strengthens social bonds exponentially. Your databases are annoyingly accurate, Alex said with a slight smile. They worked in comfortable silence for several minutes before Vera spoke again. The empathic feedback makes it difficult to separate my emotions from others. When you're near me, especially when you're being kind, I feel your genuine care and concern. But I also feel echoes of my research team's terror and pain. Is that happening now? Vera paused, apparently taking internal inventory of her emotional state. Less than usual. Your own grief, it provides context that somehow makes mine more manageable. Like recognizing a familiar harmony in a complex piece of music. Shared experience creating emotional resonance. Something like that. Though the analogy isn't quite accurate for sanguinari psychology. Vera hesitated, then continued. We don't just feel emotions, we experience them as quantum states that can overlap and interfere with each other. Your grief and mine aren't the same, but they're compatible frequencies. Alex found this fascinating from a scientific perspective, but he was more interested in its practical implications. Does that make it easier or harder to be around me? Easier, surprisingly. The dissonance between your kindness and my trauma responses is less jarring when there's an underlying harmonic relationship. I have no idea what that means, but it sounds positive. Iris, can you provide translation assistance for interdisciplinary emotional terminology? I believe Dr. Nightshade is indicating that your emotional states are complementary rather than conflicting, Iris explained helpfully. Think of it as psychological harmony versus psychological discord. Ah. So we're emotionally compatible despite having completely different trauma sources. That's actually a remarkably accurate interpretation, Vera said, sounding surprised. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from the station's defense systems. Iris's cheerful voice took on a note of professional urgency. Doctors Rivera and Nightshade, we have a code yellow situation in Storage Bay 7. The Kepler 186F specimens are showing unusual activity patterns. Alex and Vera exchanged glances. Code yellow meant potential containment breach, not immediately life-threatening, but requiring immediate attention from qualified personnel. What kind of unusual activity? Vera asked, already moving toward the lab's emergency equipment locker. The specimens appear to be responding to some form of external stimulus. Energy output has increased by 300% over the past 6 minutes. External stimulus. Alex grabbed his portable scanner and followed Vera toward the door. Any changes in the storage bay environment? Negative. However, I should note that the activity spike began approximately 4 minutes after your mutual disclosure of personal trauma experiences. Alex and Vera stopped walking and stared at each other. You think the parasites are responding to our emotional states? Alex asked. Interdimensional organisms often exhibit sensitivity to quantum fluctuations, Vera replied thoughtfully. Strong emotions, especially traumatic memories, could theoretically create the kind of dimensional resonance they might perceive as. As what? As prey. Vera's expression was grim. These entities feed on dimensional instability. Emotional trauma creates exactly that kind of instability in the local quantum field. Iris, how many personnel are currently in the sections adjacent to Storage Bay 7? 14 individuals, Dr. Rivera. Should I initiate evacuation protocols? Not yet, Vera said quickly. Sudden population movements might trigger a more aggressive response. But monitor everyone's biosignatures and be ready to seal the bay if necessary. As they hurried toward Storage Bay 7, Alex couldn't help but note the irony. So the parasites are attracted to the exact kind of emotional vulnerability you've been trying to protect people from. It appears so. Which means my isolation protocols may have been more necessary than I realized. Or, Alex suggested as they reached the bay's entrance, it means we need to find a way to transform that vulnerability into strength. Use our emotional connection as a weapon instead of a liability. Vera looked at him with something that might have been hope. That's either brilliant or completely insane. Why not both? They entered the storage bay to find the parasite specimens writhing within their containment fields, their translucent forms pulsing with increasing energy. The readings on Alex's scanner were unlike anything they'd recorded before. They're trying to establish dimensional anchors, Vera observed, studying her own readings. But they can't quite lock onto our reality. Because we're not giving them the kind of trauma response they expect? Possibly. Or because. Vera paused, her expression shifting as she processed a new theory. Alex, when you shared your grief with me, how did it feel? Painful, but also, relieving, somehow. Like finally setting down something heavy I'd been carrying. Yes. And for me, the empathic feedback from your emotions created resonance instead of dissonance. Vera's eyes were bright with scientific excitement. What if the parasites feed not on trauma itself, but on the isolation and disconnection that trauma creates? The quantum instability might come from emotional wounds that never heal because they're never shared. So connection and understanding actually starve them of their energy source. Iris, Vera called urgently, what are the current energy readings from the specimens? Decreasing steadily, Dr. Nightshade. Output has dropped to 150% above baseline and continuing to decline. Alex looked at the specimens, then at Vera. They're getting weaker as we get stronger. It appears so. Which suggests that my 14 years of self-imposed isolation may have been exactly the wrong approach for both healing and prevention. Good news, we might have found a way to neutralize these things permanently. Bad news, it requires the kind of emotional vulnerability that terrifies you. Vera was quiet for a moment, watching the specimens continue to weaken within their containment fields. Finally, she looked at Alex with determination that seemed to surprise both of them. Then I suppose it's time to stop being terrified, she said. Because if sharing our pain can protect other people from what happened to my research team, then that's what we're going to do. 6 weeks later, Alex stood in the observation deck of Aurora Prime's newest laboratory facility, watching Vera conduct the final phase of their interdimensional parasite neutralization project. The procedure they developed required something unprecedented in xenobiological research, a deliberate psychic link between the human and Sanguinari researchers, creating a stable emotional resonance field that disrupted the parasite's ability to anchor in local reality. Iris, are you recording all biometric data from both participants? Alex asked, though his eyes never left Vera as she prepared the containment field modifications. All systems recording, Dr. Rivera, Iris replied. Though I must say, this procedure remains theoretically fascinating and practically terrifying from my perspective. Join the club, Alex muttered, checking his own equipment one final time. The past 6 weeks had been a revelation in both scientific discovery and personal growth. Their initial breakthrough in Storage Base 7 had led to a series of carefully controlled experiments demonstrating that the parasite's dimensional anchor points could be destabilized by what Vera termed integrated emotional resonance, the quantum harmony created when traumatic experiences were shared and processed rather than isolated and suppressed. More importantly for Alex, those 6 weeks had shown him Vera gradually emerging from the emotional isolation that had defined her existence since Kepler 186f. She still carried the trauma, probably always would, but she was learning to carry it as part of her strength rather than as a burden that defined her limits. Alex, Vera called from the main lab area, the specimens are responding to the pre-procedure preparations. Are you ready for psychic link initiation? As ready as anyone can be for deliberate telepathic connection with someone who experiences emotions as quantum states, Alex replied, moving to the secondary control station they designed for his participation. The procedure itself was elegantly simple in concept, fiendishly complex in execution. Vera would establish a psychic link with Alex, sharing not just her current emotional state but the traumatic memories from Kepler 186f that created the strongest dimensional resonance. Alex's role was to provide what Vera called emotional grounding, stable, accepting presence that transformed the trauma from isolated suffering into shared experience. The key, Vera had explained during their preparation sessions, is that you can't try to fix my memories or make them less painful. You have to witness them as they are and choose to stay connected anyway. Just like friendship, Alex had replied. Seeing someone completely and choosing to care about them anyway. Now, as they initiated the procedure that could revolutionize humanity's defense against interdimensional threats, Alex found himself thinking about how much his understanding of connection had evolved. 6 weeks ago, he'd thought empathy meant trying to take away someone's pain. Now he understood that sometimes the greatest kindness was simply staying present while someone processed their own healing. Psychic link establishing, Vera announced, her voice taking on the slightly distant quality that indicated she was accessing her species' enhanced consciousness abilities. Alex, you'll begin receiving empathic impressions in approximately 30 seconds. Iris, monitor both our stress levels and intervene if either of us approaches dangerous psychological thresholds. Understood, Dr. Rivera. Though my friendship protocol suggests that your mutual trust levels are quite remarkable for the level of vulnerability this procedure requires. Alex felt the first whispers of Vera's consciousness touching his mind, not thoughts or words, but pure emotion translated into something his human neurology could process. At first it was simply her current state, focused determination mixed with nervousness and, underneath it all, a warmth directed toward him that made his chest tighten with recognition. Then the memories began. Alex experienced Kepler 186f not as Vera had described it, but as she had lived it. He felt her excitement at the breakthrough research, her pride in her team's collaborative work, her growing concern as the dimensional barriers began behaving unexpectedly. Most devastating of all, he experienced her helpless horror as the parasites manifested and began systematically consuming her colleagues. But something remarkable happened as the traumatic memories flowed between them. Instead of the crushing isolation Vera had carried for 14 years, Alex felt the experience transformed by his presence into shared witness. The pain remained, would always remain, but it was no longer solitary suffering. It became tragedy acknowledged, loss mourned collectively, and grief carried by two people instead of one. The specimens, Vera said, her voice strained but steady, are destabilizing rapidly. Alex opened his eyes to see the parasites writhing within their containment fields, their translucent forms growing increasingly transparent as they lost cohesion with local reality. The readings on his scanner showed dimensional anchor points dissolving faster than they could regenerate. It's working, he said, maintaining the psychic link despite the emotional intensity of Vera's memories. They can't maintain stability when trauma becomes connection. Alex, Vera said suddenly, her voice carrying a note of wonder, the feedback loop is reversing. Instead of trauma creating more trauma, the shared experience is actually. She paused, apparently searching for words. It's actually healing the psychic scarring. How is that possible? I think the scarring wasn't caused by the trauma itself, but by carrying it alone. The quantum dissonance that embedded the memories in my psychic matrix is resolving because your emotional resonance provides the missing harmonics. Iris's voice carried obvious excitement. Doctors Rivera and Nightshade, the parasites have lost dimensional coherence completely. They're reverting to their native dimensional state and can no longer manifest in local reality. Alex felt Vera's consciousness in his mind shift from sharing trauma to sharing something else entirely, joy, relief, and a kind of wonder that spoke to discoveries beyond the scientific. We did it, Vera said, though she maintained the psychic link. The procedure worked. More than worked, Alex replied. According to these readings, we've created a replicable method for neutralizing these entities using nothing but human sanguinari emotional collaboration. They gradually ended the psychic link, both of them needing time to process what they'd experienced. Alex felt oddly bereft as Vera's consciousness withdrew from his mind, leaving him alone in his own emotional landscape for the first time in over an hour. How do you feel? Alex asked, studying Vera's face for signs of the usual post-trauma exhaustion. Different, Vera replied thoughtfully. The memories are still painful, but they're not infected anymore. They're just sad events that happened, rather than open wounds that never heal. The psychic scarring is resolving. Not completely, but significantly. For the first time in 14 years, I can think about my research team without experiencing empathic feedback loops. Vera looked at him with an expression of gratitude so profound it made Alex's breath catch. Thank you for staying present through all of that. Thank you for trusting me with it. Iris, Vera called, please compile all data from this procedure for immediate transmission to both Human Defense Command and the Sanguinari Council. This methodology could protect colonies across the galaxy. Already compiling, Dr. Nightshade. Though I should note that the personal implications of your breakthrough may be as significant as the military applications. Meaning? Meaning that you've essentially proven that interspecies emotional collaboration can solve problems that neither species could address independently, Iris explained. This could revolutionize approaches to trauma treatment, conflict resolution, and collaborative research across multiple disciplines. Alex looked at Vera, seeing not the isolated, guilt-ridden researcher she'd been 6 weeks ago, but someone who had transformed her greatest source of pain into her greatest strength. So what happens now? Alex asked. Now we write the most important research paper in xenopsychological history, Vera replied. And then we probably get assigned to establish the galaxy's first joint human Sanguinari trauma treatment center. Working together. I can't imagine doing this work with anyone else, Vera said with a smile that transformed her entire face. Besides, someone needs to keep Iris from providing inappropriate relationship counseling to our patients. I heard that. Iris protested. My relationship counseling protocols are perfectly appropriate for the context. 6 months later, Alex stood in the newly established Interspecies Psychological Research Institute, watching Vera give a presentation to delegates from 12 different species about revolutionary approaches to trauma treatment. The techniques they developed at Aurora Prime had been successfully adapted for multiple species combinations, creating healing opportunities that had previously been considered impossible. The key insight, Vera was explaining to her audience, is that emotional isolation perpetuates trauma regardless of species. Connection and witness don't eliminate painful memories, but they transform those memories from sources of ongoing damage into integrated experiences that can inform wisdom and compassion. After her presentation, she joined Alex in the Institute's observation garden, a peaceful space designed to accommodate the relaxation needs of multiple species. How does it feel to be the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies emotional healing? Alex asked. Like I'm finally doing the work I was meant to do, Vera replied. Instead of running from the worst thing that ever happened to me, I get to use it to help other people heal from their worst things too. Any regrets about that night in Lab Section C when you finally told me the truth? Vera considered this seriously. Only one. I regret that it took me 8 months to trust you with it. All that time I spent afraid that you'd reject me if you knew who I really was. And instead I learned that who you really are is someone even more remarkable than I'd imagined. Thank you, Alex. For understanding. For staying. For showing me that healing doesn't mean forgetting or moving on, it means transforming pain into purpose. Alex watched the artificial sunset paint the garden in shades of gold and crimson that reminded him of Vera's eyes when she was happy. You know what I learned? What? That asking someone to understand you isn't a burden, it's a gift. It's trusting another person with the truth of who you are and giving them the chance to choose you anyway. Vera smiled, the expression full of the peace that came from being truly known and accepted completely. Please understand me, human, she said softly, echoing her desperate plea from that night in the lab. Always, Alex replied. And thank you for letting me.